Welcome to Homeroom. I'm Kansas City Public Schools Social Studies Coordinator Paul Turner. Today we're going to talk about Open Up the West. Why it was important, basically who benefited from it, and basically who suffered from Open Up the West. Again, you'll need a pencil and paper and ready to learn. Today's objective, we're going to explain the causes and the effects of the settlement in the West from 1877 to 1898. Why was this important? But again, we're going to talk about the positive changes, the progress, the growth, and the negatives and Open Up the West. Who was moving to the West? Who was not moving to the West? And why were they moving? Why was it important for these people to basically migrate in the West? And did America fulfill its dream of immigrants? Basically, the immigrants, when they came, did they fulfill the American dream? These are all important questions that we have to answer throughout this lesson. So, we're going to start off. 1862 was a huge year. Begin, we got the Civil War going on. We had all this other stuff going on. And again, a lot of these cities are basically just sprawling out, right? You got a lot of these new immigrants coming to the United States trying to vilify this American dream, correct? But they didn't have land in basically these big cities. So you saw a lot of these Irish immigrants who were coming to the United States basically deciding with this Homestead Act where they were giving away free land, 160 acres. What can you do with 160 acres today, right? They can go basically make these farms nice, basically plantable, right? And they can live this American dream. And again, the high prices of wheat, people wanted bread, right? So wheat was high right now. So the price of wheat, so I go there, basically go cut some grass down, make some wheat, I can make a lot of money. That was all good. So think about this time frame. From 1877 to 1898, you have over 500,000 families moving to the West. And when I say the West, I'm talking about modern day places like Oklahoma, Kansas, Wyoming, places like that, right? Like Nebraska too, because these places are newfound land. If I'm an immigrant, I can make a lot of money off this 168 if I farm it right. And remember, a lot of these immigrants are coming from farming territories from Europe. Okay, we're going to talk about Frederick Jackson Turner. He was a historian, and he defined this American West as a rugged, a rough area, right? And he came up with this thesis. For America to reach its greatness, it had to basically take this land and basically create it and cultivate it, right? But it's also going to do harm because it's going to harm the natural beauty of basically cultivating this land. What you did. So, why would I go to the West? Maybe I'm looking for something different, right? You remember, there's really no safety valve in American society. So there's no upward mobility, correct? So I'm living in these cities. It's a rough area to live in. Again, I have to deal with, pollution. I have to deal with traffic. I have to, like the traffic like we do today. But, these tenement buildings where there's a lot of people. So if I move west, I can get 168 free acres of land from the federal government. So this is huge. Why people would want to go west. That's one of those push and pull factors, right? That we talked about earlier. And again, it was mostly immigrants who were heading out there. Irish, right? The Germans started coming over. This is where they were landing, right? So this provided these guys ample opportunity to live that land, live off the agriculture, what they were doing back in their home countries. Again, if I'm in a city though, I have industry that was keeping me afloat. I have basically, I'll come over here, my cousin's already over here, he can hook me up with a job in one of these manufacturing plants, right? So the city provided people like a safety net for them. In the West, to provide that, this sense of excitement. I can build my own. I can create my own wealth in American society. I can basically create my own American dream if I moved out west. We started talking about California. We're going to talk about the gold rush and all that good stuff. That's one of those pull factors to the west. Because think about it. I can go find some gold and I can become rich overnight. Wow, that's really interesting. So, maintaining the beauty of the West. There's a lot of corporate interest in moving west. Because you have these waterways, you have these ponds. They want to basically own those rights. Then you're going to see the start of conservation movement. Okay? If I own a farm, I still need water, right? We have to understand that the West is rugged. It's tough during this time frame. So I have to build my own basically way to get water to my land. But if I'm corporate, I have money to get to that land, right? So I can basically bring water in. So you have these corporate interests versus basically these small town farmer interests. So you start seeing this conservation movement coming about. They want to protect the beauty of these lands, right? So let's talk about the national park movement. 1872, Yellowstone basically becomes the first national park in the United States, right? By 1890, you have Yosemite and Sequoia, basically in the west, basically become these federal protected lands. So again, we wanted to protect the beauties of the west, right? Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis was correct. You had to tame the west basically for America to reach its greatness. He was correct on that. He was absolutely correct on that. That thesis basically is what basically helped push us forward, basically become this great, mighty power that we are. Alright? So, do we really need more farmers? By the time of 1880s, 1890s, we had some things going on. You had new technologies coming about. You started seeing like the tractors, the plows, all those good stuff basically becoming mechanized. Again, we're going through a technology revolution during this time frame. So again, that affected farming. So did we need as many farmers as basically these 500,000 families that moved west? Think about that question. Then you have basically these farmers who relied on a single crop. That's what damaged most of these families from becoming these big-time farmers. Some of these farmers have been farming these lands today from the 1870s, 1860s, right? A lot of these families lost everything because they were single crop farmers. That's one thing that they did when they moved out there because that's what they were used to, basically in the old country. If I'm coming from Ireland or Irish, if I'm Irish, I'm used to doing the potato, right? So that's all I really know. If I'm coming from the American South, I might try to do cotton. That's all I know, right? So a lot of these families, they didn't know about this thing about, diversifying your crops. How about crop rotation? They didn't know about this stuff. So when they went out there, literally they lasted about 2 to 5 years and they were done. They were done with farming because they didn't know how to basically do diverse crops and basically take care of their land. Then you had price drops by the 1890s. That affected farming a lot. A lot of farmers realized that it's not economical to basically become farmers, right? They realized that all this crops and all this time that they put in the land, they were losing money on. They had high debts. They had to pay these debts back to the bank. So banks was basically started calling their loans on some of these lands. So some of these farmers went bankrupt, right? Then we forgot about this thing called droughts. If I don't have any water, guess what? My plants are not growing, correct? My land is basically tough. It's going to be a rough year for me. Then we have to start dealing with things like grasshoppers and other things. So it was rough being a farmer from this time frame. Let's do a knowledge check. Can we explain the causes and effects of settlement in the West from 1877, 1898? Let's think about that. The Homestead Act of 1862 basically was enticing for people to move out to the Midwest and out to the West, right? They provided an opportunity to build wealth. Excitement, you remember? I can become rich on my own. I don't need my cousin to basically give me a job at the factory in the city. This all became great opportunities for these people to move out west. Alright, so failure to launch. Again, 1880s and 1870s, you have these huge grasshopper plagues. Basically, if I'm planting like beans or something else, beans or corn, the grasshoppers are coming to eat them up. Every summer, it happened numerous of times in the summertime. Then you have thousands of farm failures. Basically, people went bankrupt. So people basically lost everything that they had. Then many blamed on the railroads because railroad prices were high. The railroads knew they could take advantage of these farmers. Then you had high taxes too. Many of these local governments basically had high taxes on these farmers. So they decided to get political. A lot of these organizations basically came together and created these cooperatives. The Grange movement was one of the first ones. Their ultimate goal was to improve lives of farmers. Basically, they had over 800,000 members, and this was in the 1860s and 1870s. Then you had other movements such as the Greenback movement. Basically, they want to reform basically the way that we replenish our money. You have the Farmer Alliance. These people was basically a social organization. basically help farmers improve their lives and create these social organizations for that to happen. And create political organizations too. Then you have the Color Farmer Alliance. Basically, they have the same mission as the Farmer Alliance. So you start seeing these organizations are reformed. These populist organizations knew that they need political clout to build upon basically this movement that was growing. So let's do the we do. Let's answer some of these questions. In what ways can change, progress, and growth be positive, negative? Again, we talked about opening up the West, right? So when we open up the West, it provides people opportunity. Positive, it allows people to basically get rich, right? Some of the negatives, we had over thousands and thousands of these bank failures. Who was moving west and who was not? And why were they moving? Again, you had immigrants moving west, right? You had these people allow them to do what they did in their own country, basically when they moved west. All right? Who's not moving west? Well, let's talk about who was not moving west. Basically, if I'm basically a rich guy on the East Coast, I'm not moving west. I might have a business out west, but I'm not moving. You remember the railroad provided ample opportunity for them to get out west, right? Did America fulfill the dream of immigrants? In some ways it did. You remember some people were able to basically live on this land from 1860 till today, still farming. You talk about places like North Dakota, South Dakota. Some of those families have been basically farming that land since those times. So we're talking about close to 140 years of some of these families basically doing this work for that same land. So now we're in the now you do. I want you to brainstorm some ideas of American history. How is the opening of the West important going forward in American society? Think about that. I want you to think about it. Let's start foreshadowing and basically start thinking about what's going forward in American society. Who is benefiting from moving west? Who is benefiting from that? We talk about the immigrants, right? What other groups are benefiting from moving west? Railroads, right? Did the average American gain wealth from moving west? Answer that question. My name is Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator, Kansas City Public School. I'll see you guys next week.